All right, it's time for Yogi and the Beach Man. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach, the Beach Man.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love. Well, welcome.
Giselle.
Hi, Giselle.
Oh, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you really well. But talk just a little bit so we can get a little mic check. I might turn you up on here.
Yeah, of course. What do you want me to talk to you about?
How you doing? Where are you at?
I'm doing okay. I'm out of Canada. What about you guys?
South Florida.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Yeah.
And we are in the middle of a thunder boomer right now.
We're hoping we don't lose power.
Oh,
yeah, it's lightning,
okay.
and I'm glad my dog isn't home alone because he'd be freaking out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Speaking of dogs, my dog hasn't been doing well, so it's been quite the day.
Sorry.
What do you have?
I have a Doberman Shepherd. He's my he's such, oh my gosh, it was a rescue, or he is a rescue. And he's had problems since the beginning, like lots of allergies and stuff. But yeah, he's the most lovable and loving dog. We don't know what happened to him. We rescued him when he was 1, but now he gets seizures and he's having some liver issues. And he's like 12 now, so you know,
well,
so.
he's if he's had health issues and he's a big dog and he made it to 12, that's all pretty good luck.
It is.
Yeah, and he actually doesn't look 12. Like when you see him, he's a black dog and he hardly has any white hair or anything. So he looks like a way younger dog.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But you know, when you have to have those difficult conversations, it can feel challenging, yeah.
For sure. I have a golden doodle that'll be 15 next month, and she occasionally has seizures, and she's had a tumor that luckily we don't think was malignant. That's resolved now. But
okay, how did it get resolved?
Well, I spent the last 5 years as a nurse. So I literally, I mean, it exploded through her side and was out about an inch, and it was about as big around in diameter as a quarter. So I thought,
okay, gotcha.
well, when we have a baby in the hospital and it grows an extra digit, they literally wrap string around it and keep tightening it till that digit falls off. So I did that for maybe a week, and it was about half off. Then I surgically removed the rest of it, and my wife found these. We did a lot of research online because we didn't want to go the vet route. So she found these Chinese herbs. We started giving them to her orally. And the next day, that thing was half the diameter. And someone else, a friend that we met at pickleball, actually, Reddy.
Okay.
His dog had one, and he put wart remover on it, and it dried it up so it wasn't oozing all the time. And within a week, maybe definitely less than 10 days, it was completely gone. You couldn't even tell where it was.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those going the natural ways. Yeah,
when he told me he did that, I'm like, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm gonna do some surgery on Noel. Like, what are you talking about?
Funny. Well, I think we've learned that, you know, like there's this perspective that there's really only one way and that vets know everything. But really, like when I look at my dog's journey, he really has been, it's just one medication after another, right? So their solution right now is to give him an additional medication for seizures. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really addressing the problem. Like it's just, I'm just putting a Band-Aid on something.
Have you thought about CBD? That's shown pretty good on seizures in humans.
Actually, I was reading about that today.
That's a cheap natural alternative. And I mean, you'd have to do some research to check on the dog situation, but they do sell it and advertise it for dogs.
Yeah.
So, and it's known to prevent or eliminate seizures in people, and epileptic seizures takes it almost down to 0 in kids even.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I actually was reading about it today. Yeah. I was thinking, you know what? Like, why don't we go the natural way in terms of Yeah, because I just see the impact that the medications have had on my dog in terms of his well-being and how hard it is on his livers, which is why he's having issues now. It's yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Well, it's good to hear that both you guys. I have a 5-year-old Yorkie, so he's just still a healthy good little guy.
yeah.
But I've been feeding him I make all his own food for years now, and he eats kind of, really healthily.
Yeah.
And what you said, you'd rather go the alternative medicine route. And that's kind of what we've kind of talked about the last 3 or 4 of our guests, kind of on how the medical establishment has lost all kind of faith. I mean, people have lost all faith in medical community, and it's spilling over to the vet market too,
Mm-hmm.
because it seems like once they get you on their treadmill of this drug or that drug or high blood pressure statins, and please, I'm done with all of it. It's all to keep us lifelong customers.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's any malice behind it. I just think that there is, it's just the only thing that they know, right? Like when I look at my parents, like I think, they like you take drug or another drug on top of the other drug, and they give you another third drug for another symptom. You're just symptom management. You're just
Mm-hmm.
surviving.
For
You're not
sure. Yep.
really, it's not really living.
Preventing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but you're absolutely right. It's not. I don't believe that when I go to my doctor and I talk to her about, whatever it is, and I've already researched what it is, and I know what I want, and I'm knowing what I'm hoping she'll tell me, but I bring that stuff up and I get pushback, and like, really, why are you challenging
Oh, they're
me?
just not trained that way.
Well, I get it, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not their fault. They believe that what they're saying is true. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't believe them anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to, yeah, there's so much in terms of the holistic and healing arts. Like there's so much more in terms of like people are more open now about manifestation and
for sure.
alignment and vibration and dimensions that people are really starting to question. Because the truth of the matter is there's that spinning wheel in terms of symptom management. People are like, I don't want to do that. And
Right.
so what other options are there? So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It is. It's interesting. My dog only gets seizures when she eats grass.
Okay, can we just, I know we're supposed to talk about a different topic, but you and I are having the same issue. So my dog, oh my gosh, thank you for saying this because my dog, whenever before he's going to have a seizure, he goes outside and eats. There's something I think toxic outside growing. I live in the
Nope.
country. There's
Nope.
something, and I
It's
see him eat this grass and eat these sorts of
mm-hmm.
things, and then he throws up and has a bad seizure.
Yep.
And
That's what my
nobody
dog does.
believes me.
Exactly. No, it's
Nobody
exactly what our dog
believes me.
does.
Yeah, is it?
I
And
believe
then
you.
when he doesn't eat the grass, he doesn't have the seizures. Like he can go a month, but
Yep.
then he's out there, and then I become like super like, oh no, he can't eat grass. He can't. You got to watch him like a hawk, right?
Right.
Like I keep him with me, but my family isn't as diligent as me as watching him. So it only takes
Mm-hmm.
a little nibble, and then he's like throwing up, and then having. That's so strange. What do you think it is?
Yeah. I have no idea, but I don't think it's toxins because I've lived in all over the country, and it could be fresh grass, it could be out in the country where there's no pesticides or anything. I don't know. I really don't
It
know.
must be something in the gut then, right? Because my
Yeah, I think so because she used to eat grass
just
all the time, and the seizures just started a couple of years ago. So I don't
it was the
know.
same with mine. It just started a couple
Hmm.
of years ago as well. Wow.
Hmm.
We'll have to
we
talk
we
later.
one of our
Thank
podcasts
you.
about a month ago was
Listen.
we interviewed 2 guys from Montreal. They were twin brothers chefs, trained chefs, and they started making custom dog food for, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, higher end type clients.
They started learning dog nutrition and what dogs need to eat, and stopped feeding them kibble and put them on real food diets. And their dogs' allergies went away. They were healthier, happier dogs. So we've slowly made that transition with our dogs. We're making the transition with our dogs. We just started this week.
But these guys specialize.
Mm,
Like if you
love it.
call, you could email these guys and say, or text them, or they'd even talk to you on the phone and say, "Hey, my dog, when they eat grass, what can I substitute or to counterbalance this?" And then they'll do the research and just help you. I don't know if you're in the Montreal area. What part of Canada are you in anyway?
I'm between Woodstock and Brantford, so it's in
In
Ontario.
Ontario, then.
It's different,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
Ontario. front
And
door.
we both grew up in the Detroit area, and we know that neck of the woods a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, this is
So
awesome.
Giselle, let me formally welcome you to the show.
And a disclaimer, some of what we just talked about for the past 15 minutes, we might use because we've been had to tape it. So if that's cool with you, it was a good dog conversation.
Yeah, so thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you filled in at the last minute because we had a cancellation. So I really appreciate you doing that and reading over your profile and everything you're doing. I'm really excited about this podcast because you're an author, a TEDx speaker, researcher, podcaster, and co-owner of Myetry Center. Yeah. You're doing a lot. I like that.
I'm doing a lot. Yeah. To be honest, I never thought I would be doing any of this. When I was growing up, I had one vision in mind, which really was to work in the field of child protection, child welfare. I grew up with parents that were very traumatized. They experienced a lot of child abuse and neglect. And so my dream was to work within the child welfare system and to transform it.
Okay.
And I did. I did work within the child protection system, try to incorporate compassion and love into these systems because the way these systems are designed, they're very fear-based and they actually put a lot of barriers to love. And I just kept swimming upstream. And I just remember lying in bed one time and saying to myself, like to my higher self, I can't do this anymore. So if you want me to devote my life to this loving compassion stuff, you need to tell me, am I staying here or am I going somewhere else? Like, because I can't do both. Like, I feel like I'm swimming upstream.
Yep.
And it ended up being that a couple of days later, I basically got like a runway, if you may, to do this other stuff, to leave this organization and to start doing the work that I'm doing. And so to me, it felt pretty magical because I didn't know that I would be doing this. I didn't even know it was a dream of mine until I actually started doing it, which is sort of weird. And the way this whole thing started was I was talking to someone, her name's Lara Naughton, and she was doing work in the prison system on compassion. So getting prisoners to repent, to really reflect on the impact of their behavior. But the most impactful work that she did was on self-compassion, having compassion for themselves and then seeking out to change their ways. And one of the things she said to me, which is so extraordinary, was the fact that, I mean, we're asking people in the prison system we pull them all together with the same level of mentality and level of perspective. And then we're asking them to do this sort of like Herculean effort of becoming more compassionate, more loving and understanding there. And it can be challenging, right? And so her work really was about getting them to tap into that compassion within themselves, to find that for themselves, and then to really understand how it is that they impacted other people and why. And so I was having this conversation with this lady. And so that was the time when I was really focused on bringing compassion into child welfare. And at the end of this conversation, for some reason, I get this inkling to ask her about a book she had written. I asked her, have you ever written a book? And she was like, actually, yes, I have. And then, I thank her for talking to me for like an hour and a half. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to get this book as a thank you because she spent an hour and a half with me. And so it'd be my honor to read her story. I get this book. And it is extraordinary in the sense of the level of loving compassion that she actually had to exercise in order for her to save her life. So she goes away on vacation. She thinks she's following this romantic thing in Belize, and she's looking for an extraordinary story of love. When she's in Belize, she gets kidnapped and assaulted, sexually assaulted, and he drove her deep into the jungle and was going to kill her.
Oh my gosh.
And in that moment, she decided that I'm going to lean into this person. I'm going to have compassion and love for this person so that they see me as a human being. And it worked. She leaned into him, asked him lots of questions, really became interested in him as a human being. And at the end of that, because he was very close to killing her, and in fact, she talks about this weird lights that came out as if a bus was, and they were just in the middle of the jungle. So there was no bus, nothing. Just these lights came on randomly as if a bus was coming, and then they disappeared as quickly as he was about to kill her. So that stopped him. And then she was really leaning into his story. And at the end of it, he started to witness someone and start to care about her. And then he drove her back to her hotel as if he had been her cab driver. And so then after that, she had to grapple with, what does it mean to love your enemy? What does it mean to witness someone who's hurting you and then try to see their humanity so that they see you? And so
That
I
is
started,
powerful.
it is.
I
And
mean, that's
so
not something most people can do.
no. And so I remember after reading this book thinking this story has to go out some, like this has to be shared. Like it's,
Yeah.
how is it that you are able to do these things? And that's what grew and established my podcast, the Love and Compassion podcast with Giselle. I tried to find these extraordinary stories and they're peppered in there. I also talk to people about the power of self-love and self-compassion and how that transformed their lives. Like there's this woman who talked about how gratitude helped her turn around her life in 21 days after she escaped horrible domestic violence. Extraordinary stories. And so this has sort of gotten me on a path where I'm really starting to learn about, what does it mean to love? What does it mean to truly love? And what is love? And how do we do what Martin Luther King said he wanted to do, which is turn an enemy into a friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how does love transform that? And I've gotten to interview some pretty interesting people. And that's what my TEDx was about. It should be coming out fairly soon. It was really about me talking about my experiences and talking to people about, like, are these people extraordinary? Like, are these, because, I have a few stories that I've gotten, and I also have a database of people that I want to get to talk to. I'm like, are these people superhuman, or can we do this? Can we actually, not to that extreme, can we really start to see those that have hurt us and find their humanity and find the human in the perpetrator at the same time while finding the power in the victim, if you may, because there is this dynamic between perpetrator and victim. And so victims sort of get categorized as these weak and vulnerable, but they're very, very powerful people that overcome many different things. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's also this untapped humanity of people that almost have to dehumanize themselves to do horrible things. Can they tap back in? Can they look into why that has been disconnected? And in fact, the podcast I'm doing tomorrow, there's an organization in Africa that actually brings together the Tutsi and Hutu from the Rwandan genocide, of people that some of them are family members, neighbors that turn on to one another and actually committed this mass genocide. This
Mm-hmm.
organization brings these two groups together, like as individuals, and brings them together in reconciliation, like victim perpetrator. They come together to talk about and why and reflect and kind of work towards this healing journey. And it's an extraordinary thing that they do. And really, when I see the bigger picture, what I'm trying to do with my podcast and with my work is understand how we can come closer together. Like in this world where we have decided that we're so divided, that we see each other as enemies, that we see each other as people that we can't find our humanity and our togetherness. What can we learn from these extraordinary stories that we can then apply to our lives, even if just in the conflict with our own people, could be our friends, our neighbors, or whatever. So that's really the goal of the podcast and my work, is really how can we come closer together. But I've managed to hear some extraordinary stories in the interim.
Well, that's really is kind of a lot to unpack, because it really is. I'm trying to process it as you're going, as you were talking through that. But the first thing you said about possibly someone who did you wrong, and in your youth or even whatever, it doesn't matter when, and having compassion and forgiveness for that person. Now, I don't have anyone in my current life that I would feel that way about, because I have made it a point for years to not feel that way about anybody anymore. And I've had the journey that I think you want people to go on. I mean, I'm a lot older than you. So probably about 15 years ago, I'm like, man, why am I getting mad at the guy that's not making the right turn at the red light? Why am I getting angry at that guy? And just expelling that energy and stuff like, so at that, I'm like, okay, I don't care if it's an extra 5 minutes in the grocery line. I just don't care anymore. I don't sweat the small shit. But when it comes to people, it's a different story. Those are just general conditions where, you can control your own reaction. There's a couple of people and I've never thought about this before, and I certainly have never shared this before, but Mike Village, my mom was a mess when we were kids.
Both our moms were. We had two dysfunctional families that we grew up in.
It really was. And in my life, and JP and I don't really talk about this too much, and we're cousins and grew up together. So just so you know,
okay, nice.
And we're a month apart, and that's how we, but there's this, one of my mom's many husbands was really violent, would drink, beat and abuse her, guns involved, and threats and breakage and just pure craziness. And that went on for a couple of years. And really, I never haven't thought about this or ever shared this before. But I mean, I still have some, just what I don't want to have is hate for this guy or anybody. But it's there. And I heard he died a few years ago and didn't care. And it didn't make me feel any better, though. I still carry that inside me from the. So I don't know. How do you it's hard to just erase that.
Yeah.
And even if he was still alive, I wouldn't want to talk to him and make amends. There's no amends. I'm the one that did the call, not him, right? So how do you make that work?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, one of the things I've heard from the people, I can think of one woman that I interviewed. Her name is Rukai, and she's actually become a really good friend. She had to forgive the people that killed her son, and they were young. I mean, I think that helped. But she focused all that energy and attention on helping kids that are traumatized. Like she actually went in the courthouse, decided and said, I'm not going to hate you. I need to understand what happened. And then through those stories, she heard about their generational trauma. She heard about all of these things that they had experienced, and now devotes her life to helping young people, like this young people that killed her son and her son. But that's not everyone's journey, right? I think really what we're trying to do in those moments, or with some of this work, is really move away from those feelings of hate, because a lot of those feelings are like a poison you drink yourself so somebody else dies. Like we hold them, we feel them. And it's about how do we kind of let go and have that forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because we, like you said, wanna let it go.
It's like a darkness in your soul that's there.
Yeah.
And it comes out when you don't want it to, or and I tried to raise my kids right, and they don't know any of that stuff. I've never even told my daughter that stuff. She'll find out now in a couple weeks, and then she'll call me, why didn't you ever tell me any of this stuff? Well, it is what
the stories we could tell.
It's part of my journey that Jim's going me on, of opening up to this kind of stuff. And anyway,
I like to think of forgiving him, not for him, for you.
No, of course. Yeah. And I know this. It's just something, I really didn't really give it much thought until, I don't know, kind of recently. It's just been popping more in my mind. But because I've been having more of these type of discussions where people help and other, I don't know.
I have a couple stories I'd like to share. So, of our of all the dysfunction, but we grew up in dysfunctional homes. At 24, I had my first daughter, and in the hospital, holding her, seeing her born and all that, and just holding her for the first time in my life, I felt this unconditional love like I've never felt before. Just overwhelming unconditional love. When it was time to leave the hospital, that was all that was on my mind, was how I was feeling this unconditional love for this being that I've never met before. It's just amazing. And I had to pull over and stop in a parking lot and just compose myself before I could drive the rest of the way home. And while I'm sitting there, I thought, what if I extended this unconditional love to everybody I see in this parking lot? And I just took a moment and just started doing that, looking around and just like, I love that person. And then I thought about doing it to the entire city and then expanding it out to the world and the universe. And it just opened my heart to such a different place. I felt like a different person when I left the parking lot. So fast forward to about 5 years ago, I was in nursing school to become a labor and delivery nurse, and I get rushed my very first day in clinicals where we're learning to be nurses. I get rushed up to the maternity ward. They're like, "We want to get you in. We want to get you in this labor." I'm like, "Okay." I run into the room, and this woman's on all fours, butt naked, screaming, trying to push out a baby. And I'm like, wow, this is the most amazing thing. I mean, I've seen children born before, but not rushed into a situation like that and seen this woman on all fours and just the way it was happening was just like, whoa. And they didn't know. So she was a drug mama. Um, they didn't know how old the baby was. She just came in without any prenatal care. Um, so they got the whole team in there in case there's any problems with this baby. And she's having a hard time getting it out. She's pushing like crazy, screaming, bleeding. It's just a mess. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a labor and delivery nurse. And that's what I did. But she has this baby and it was fine. But all the other nurses shun this woman. Oh, how can she do drugs and have carry a baby and blah, so much judgment. And here I am thinking, what's her backstory? Who knows what she's had to endure and what she's gone through to be at this point in her life? Where's the compassion for her? And it was really sad. She ended up leaving the hospital that night and left the baby. But I stayed in the room with her. I didn't care. I just stayed in the room with her. I was there for her. Anything she needed, get her water. All the other old senior nurses there were like, yeah, you're not
Well,
getting
I
my
mean,
care.
there's a couple sides to that. I mean, I have compassion in this since that's the word of the day here for that baby, and
Mm-hmm.
and that would be my number one priority, and her feelings or whatever would be number two to me in that situation. Whether or not there should be some judgment going on, I guess that's between you and your conscience. But I mean, I admit, man, I would be the same way. I mean, this bitch could have killed this beautiful baby just because of her own selfish needs. Whether or not that's
But we don't know if there were
right,
selfish needs, if she was being abused, if she was
there's no,
trafficked. We
and
don't know anything about her
I would
story.
say, that most of the not a good portion of those people in that situation fit in that category. I would agree.
Mm.
So, and you're right. I mean, there's no reason to have. I'm admitting my fault here.
And I think that's so very honest of you. And I think
It
that's
is.
so fair because I think people aren't honest about what they feel and therefore we
Mm-hmm.
can't engage in dialogue. And this
Yeah.
this this dichotomy is something I saw in child welfare. It was this or that. So a baby's well-being versus mom's well-being. And there was a constant fight between the two. But it doesn't have to be this or that. It can be this and that. So you can
Mm-hmm.
extend
And
compassion to the baby and have compassion for the mom. Now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I've learned having worked in child welfare is because we saw like a lot of kids that didn't experience a lot of love in their homes turn to drugs, turn to different things. Drug use is a symptom. It's not like why do people do drugs? That's why the war on drugs doesn't work because you really are just fighting something. You're not really addressing the root of the problem. People take
agree.
drugs to
Yep.
escape, to get
Yeah.
rid of their current environment. They don't really know that there are other ways. You could do meditations, you could do lots of different ways. And so
Mm-hmm.
people want to escape what's happening to them. They don't want to be in their body. So the key to addressing that is helping them regulate their own emotions. It's tap into that love and compassion to themselves. Because as long as there is something that will help them escape, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people, the government thinks that the problem is the drug use. The drug use is a symptom of a problem.
Yeah.
And so really to address the problem, you have to address the lack of love, the emotional regulation, the facing all those difficult emotions. And we saw this a lot in the child welfare system, which is when kids really don't feel that love, that unconditional love, that support, they feel unlovable, and all of their behaviors reflect that. They will push away
Mhm.
people that are loving, and they will only, because it's comfortable. It's comfortable to be in that abuse. It's because they learn how to maneuver. So
Yep.
they will reject people that are loving. They will reject help and support. And it doesn't make sense to people like us who might have received some level of unconditional love, but to them, it's a survival thing. Like, it doesn't feel safe to feel loved because they've only been hurt. And so to love feels way too vulnerable, more
Mhm.
vulnerable than actually being in abusive relationships and just learning how to maneuver.
Yeah.
So that was paradoxical for me to learn.
Yeah. It's interesting because around 21 years old, um, learning that my mom's an alcoholic, I was in the Navy. I was recommended to go to some adult children of alcoholic classes. And I'm in there and I start hearing people telling their stories and how they felt. And I realized I didn't know the term for it then, but I realized that I'm an alexophilia. I had no idea what the terms were for what I was feeling. So I couldn't express myself
Well,
because I never knew what I was feeling.
what does that term mean?
That means you don't understand what you're feeling. Whether you're feeling jealousy, hate, any emotion, you feel something, but you don't know what it is that you're feeling.
I could see that in you.
Totally have it. I've been working on overcoming it for a long time, and trying to understand my feelings and what's happening. But yeah, 21 years old, realizing I didn't know I had these feelings. I didn't know a name for these feelings, what they were. Very
Isn't that
interesting.
interesting? It's also
Yeah.
one of the things I've also discovered is that sometimes when you feel kind of emotionally numb, you think, I don't have any feelings. It's actually you're feeling too much.
Hmm.
You're feeling so many things all at once that you actually can't pinpoint it. So you feel like I don't have any feelings. Is that you have maxed out your central nervous system. You've maxed it out,
Hmm.
so it doesn't know which way to go. So you're just kind of frozen. And you
Yep.
see that a
Yeah.
lot of it in children that have experienced child abuse.
Hmm.
So what's really sad to me, I mean, what's not sad is that someone like you went into the child welfare services and to try to make a difference in that world of that government bureaucracy and the stuff that goes on. But what is sad is that when they get a quality person like you who cares, they run you off because you just know that you just, like you said, you just couldn't do it anymore. It was
Yeah.
and I think that's symptomatic of that whole. I don't want to get into a political discussion here, but I think it's
Or
symptomatic
do
of that.
you?
Well, I'll throw it out there, but no, but I think it's symptomatic of the problems of the people that are in that type of government bureaucracy to kind of just keep it going. There's not really a reason for them to fix it, because if it got fixed, they wouldn't have their position and couldn't expand their budget and all the other stuff that goes along with that stuff. So I believe that people that they fail upward.
Yeah. So I totally hear what you're saying. So one of the things I did, so I have a couple of degrees. I have two masters, and the second one that I did was on compassion and child welfare. And one of the things I noticed was this trend. Okay. So the government focus is just child safety. It tends to be child physical safety over like emotional safety, right? Because physical safety is easier to look at. So you bubble wrap the kids, don't prevent them from going to sleepovers because everybody has to have a criminal check. You want to bubble wrap them so that they don't face anything. And then but then what happens is that they get separated from their families, they go into stranger care, and then there is an outrage by the public because they're like, oh, you're keeping families away. Da, 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 da. So then the government changes their strategy and goes, okay, now we're allowing families to see their children because separating means that we're doing damage. Da, 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 da. And something happens to the kids. And then they constrain again. This pendulum that keeps happening between
For
safety and
sure.
like the perspective, part of that pendulum has to do with the public's reaction. The public, because they think if you're one of the things I have observed too in this whole thing is that people are afraid to be compassionate. What if I'm compassionate, so I'm going to be taken advantage of. If I'm compassionate with this parent, they're going to hurt the kid and then I'm going to get sued. And so it's all based on fear, and fear causes constriction. Whereas compassion and love are about curiosity. You open your heart and go, I may not agree with this, but I'm just going to try to understand what is going on for you, what's happening for you, that you need to behave in this way. What is happening for you that you get so angry that you just have to explode to it? Like, what's happening for you? And that engages sort of you become in a different conversation. You become willing to be open. In having those conversations, you have to be willing to change your mind and your heart. Because if you're not, then you're not really engaging in dialogue, you're debating. You just want to, hey, I'm right, and here's my debate point. But if you're willing to engage in an open-hearted dialogue, you're willing to be wrong and you're willing to change your heart and your mind. So that's the thing about child welfare. It's so fear-based, it leaves no room for love. It's so fear-based. It's just, and so there are many great people that are foster parents, many great workers, many great kids, many great families that are working up the current, like they're working up and they're still there. I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. So, because I think my journey was different. And so I kept going up swim street, like going up, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is what I'm meant to do. I want to be in the flow. So then when I asked that question, I was open to it. I was like, okay, the universe said, no, you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to share these stories and understand what does it really mean to love people. And when we look at the definition of love, a lot of the definition of love that we've been taught is conditional. I love you guys if you behave. I love you if you're loving. I love you if you're not hurtful. I love you if you're generous. I love you. That's not love. That's conditional. So that's attachment. True love is the way that God, source, universe sees us, which is perfection. And I do believe we're all aspects of source having this human experience. And so one of the things I ask myself is, can I see the divine in you? Even when you're hurtful? Can I see the divine in you even when you behave the way that maybe I would not prefer? Because I would want somebody to see the divine in me when I make mistakes, when I'm hurtful, when I'm right. Because there's an aspect of me that is very human. And so when I make a mistake or I become hurtful, and I've hurt people in my past, and so I really had to reflect, how do I want to be treated when I'm hurtful? And how do, like, what opportunities do other people have? And so I think the problem that we have with love and compassion is we think you have to be perfect at it. You know, if you're not Mother Teresa, even Mother Teresa, people are like, oh, Mother Teresa did this, cancel her. The Dalai Lama said something that people found inappropriate. He's out. Like, we're not going to be perfect. We're human beings. You just have willing to love. You just have to be willing to be compassionate. And like you guys said, you know, like it's moment by moment. I'm in traffic. I'm frustrated by the jerk that has cut me off. I'm just choosing to love. I'm choosing not to hold on to that. I just want to be loved and share my love. And the sun doesn't determine, oh, you're worthy and you're not worthy. It just shines upon everyone, right? Like it just shines equally. I'm like the sun, like you shine brightly and upon the deserving and not deserving. You just want to love that way, in a way that doesn't have deservability attached to it, I guess.
It's interesting. I went to pick up something on Facebook Marketplace today, and it's a 15-minute drive. I'm driving there, and I check my rear view, and there's a guy 2 inches off my bumper. I can't get over. There's traffic, so I just slowed way down, and all of a sudden he zooms, over next to me, and he didn't even go fully in the other lane. He's like he's still in my lane, zooming next to me, and cuts back in and takes off. So he gets caught by the light. I get caught by the light. I get to the turn. He's in front of me. This is the guy I'm going to buy something from on Facebook Marketplace.
It's the same dude?
The same
oh
guy.
My God.
My first thoughts were, I'm not buying anything from this jerk.
That's very natural.
But I thought, well, that's judgment. I just let that go. And I went up and I actually confronted him when I got into his garage. I said, were you the guy that was just behind me on Midway? He goes, yeah. I saw you go drive by. I said, yeah, I actually passed your house. I went to the wrong address at first. And then I left it at that. I didn't say, why are you driving like a jerk or nothing. I was just let it go.
So did you make a deal with the dude?
Well, ended up not wanting what he had, but that wasn't because of his driving.
Yeah. And it's not that judgments aren't going to happen, right? Like, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's very natural to do that. But then you have a choice in that moment. So when you have the deal, you're like, oh, we've all done it. We're like, oh, I'm not going to buy from that person. I can't believe it. And then you're like, you know what? Is that the energy that I choose to feed? No.
Yeah. He was rushing home to be there for me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. He's like, he goes, he's trying to get through.
Some karma working there. Yeah. Hey, as you were telling that story about, having that forgiveness or compassion for someone that might hurt you, that doesn't absolve someone of being responsible for being hurtful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm trying to put that together. So if someone would say something hurtful to me and I trying to repeat kind of what you're trying to get across here. So now then I would have compassion for that person, but still, I mean, because that person might be in relationship with me or a family member or a friend or whatever that I don't want to have animosity toward, right? But if still they say something hurtful to me and I think they're wrong, I'm just not going to kind of let it go. I'm going to give some pushback. How does that differ from, or how could me being more compassionate in that situation work?
It's interesting in my journey in learning how to forgive myself and other people. One of the things I've realized is that, there's this quote, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but I'm just going to say it, which is, in the eyes of the master, compassion is not, forgiveness isn't needed. What that means is that when you really truly stand in your power, meaning that you are no longer giving your power away to people to determine how you feel about yourself and your life. So somebody could call me lots of different names. I couldn't give three craps, to be honest, because the truth of the matter is nobody has any influence. Like, no, I'm not choosing for them to impact me. I'm not choosing to get upset at the guy who cuts me off or if they call me a name or whatever. I'm not choosing to give other people my power anymore. And so when I realized that I can never be broken, my soul can never be broken. I can never be destroyed. I can never be, all of those things did happen to me and I experienced pain. Absolutely. But if suffering is necessary until it's no longer necessary, as Eckhart Tolle says, I'm choosing not to suffer anymore. I'm choosing not to see myself as a victim. I am choosing not to allow those people to impact me anymore, whether I live successfully, whether I love myself, whether I accept myself, whether I live my dreams. They have no power over me that I'm choosing to give them. So once I live from that place, this is a journey, right? When you choose to step up into your own power and say, I'm no longer giving power to you to determine how I feel, your relationship changes. You begin to understand that people do what they do because of their own situations. It is the truth I have observed in my life, and with all of these people I've interviewed, that hurt people. They start to see you as the other. They're so divided. They see you as competition, or they see you as like, you're my means to an end, so I can screw you. I don't care about you because you're separate from me. When you start to understand that we are all interdependent, and the more I love you, the more that spills onto other people and comes back to me in different ways. It's the same with people that, like, screw each other. My husband and I were having this conversation about real estate. We were having this conversation about, how, like, for the longest time, everybody has been told that real estate is the way to go, right? So right now in the Canadian housing market, there's a large group of people that bought investment properties, right? Like just a second house so that they could rent out so that they can make money. And the prices kept inflating. So now these people are meeting that there's like thousands of homes that people can't afford. And they're going to foreclosure or they're going to have to sell them because they can't find people to sell them. But what they don't realize is that by doing that, trying to get as much of a high amount as they can as possible. They have now made it so impossible for people to buy a home that they have isolated their own buyers. They wanted to do this so that they could get money. Absolutely great. But then you have inflated the price so much that the people are no, they like there's nobody to buy.
Market forces will bring those prices down just by supply and demand.
Exactly. So, but you don't understand that this is all interconnected. So
for
when
sure.
you are actually, by artificially inflating it, you are isolating yourself from that income that you so want. And so we start to understand that the only way we're going to make it is together, right? Like I help you, then you help me, we help each other, we can all win. Like this whole zero sum game is some BS that we bought from like the war times when people were facing wars and there was scarcity. Sure, okay, that happened then, but we have carried these stories. It is possible for you to live your dreams and for me to live my dreams. There's not a zero sum game. There's enough for everyone of everything. We just have to be willing to not see each other as enemies. And I think that's where the stepping stone is for us to not see each other as, okay, you have impact over me. I'm a victim. You're my perpetrator. And I can't see beyond those roles, right?
Yeah. I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on ghosting? And I'm assuming you're familiar with that term.
Yes. Is this when somebody just kind of like,
done with you? Yeah.
done with you?
I'm done with your hurt. I'm done with your greed. I'm done with.
We'll set that up. Are you talking like in a personal situation or a business situation?
Yeah, I'm talking about a personal situation where somebody, and I don't want to get into who, has hurt other family members, who's disrespected me, has just did terrible things. And it's like, okay, I'm just done with you. I don't need that. What are your thoughts on ghosting?
Yeah, so thank you for asking this question. This is such a great question because one of the things I've learned in my life, it's not so much what you do, but the energy behind the thing that you do. And a friend of mine taught me this. So it is possible for you to release people with love and say, you know what? Like, you're not a vibrational match for me, and we're not in alignment. I release you with love. I wish you the best. I love you. I can love you from a distance because I also love myself. So I don't really need to interact with you 100%. If I see you, I will send you love and I will wish you the best and I'll be polite. But I can choose not to engage in a daily basis. But I don't wish you ill. I hope all your dreams come true. I just wish you well, but I'm just releasing you with love. It's the energy behind everything that we do. Yeah, it's the energy behind everything that we do. And we can be honest and have conversations with people and say, you know what? I'm not really resonating with this. I wish you the very best. I just really can't engage in this conversation or dialogue anymore. That's okay. I think you have to meet yourself where you're at and you have to meet people where they're at. Because you can have the most respectful behavior, but from an energetic perspective, be dooming and cursing people. So it really is the energy behind. And when I have shifted my energy with people, there's sometimes when I don't have to do physically things. I'm a prof at a university contract faculty, and I had an issue with a student. They didn't like their mark and they were sending me all these angry emails. And I was starting to get worked up. I was like, oh my God, I'm contract faculty. What's the dean going to say? Am I going to have to? And then I was like, you know what? No, this is not what I'm doing. What do I want to do? Okay, I want this to work out for me and for the student. So right before I went to bed, and usually in the morning or before going to bed is usually when I do these sorts of things. And I was like, you know what? Everything is going to work out. It's going to work out beautifully for me. And it's going to work wonderfully for the student. I sent an email to the student and said, I'm happy to meet with you to explain because you're important to me. And I'm happy to spend as much time as we can to resolve this. And then I went to bed and I didn't think about it anymore. I decided that it was all going to work out beautifully. So a few days, and this was the student that was very, very angry, like sending me these nasty emails. 2 days later, 3 days later go by. I don't hear anything from the student. And I'm thinking, okay, you know what? Whatever it goes out, it's going to work out well. The student emails me and says, all is well, no need to meet. oh, I think you're a most compassionate and loving person. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful year. And, and I was like, is this the same student? I have to check, but I'm like, is this the same student? And I've been able to shift those sorts of relationships when I reimagine people. And that's one of the things I say in my book. I have reimagining work, because it was, really thinking, how do we reimagine the workplace? Like, there's so much conflict and drama. I'm like, can we just reimagine people in situations where we see the most loving outcome happen? And we envision people at their best self. Now, they may not align to that best self, but if they're looking for it, here's the alignment. And I have found that in majority of circumstances, people do align and things shift. It's sort of magical, and it's sort of like really interesting. It's not like I can do it 100% of the times, because when
Mhm.
I when I don't do it, it's when I have limiting beliefs about it, and there's a reason I'm holding on to. Like, there's a reason why I'm having a hard time reimagining that person for my own hurt, and I gotta deal with my own emotions first. I gotta address those, because usually when I'm having a hard time with that, there's some unmet needs for me.
Sure.
Like, there's maybe some sadness, or maybe some self-forgiveness, or something where I need to kind of soothe my inner self and say, hey, you didn't feel safe. It's hard for you to forgive or to reimagine this person, because first, the thing you need to do first is to help yourself regain that physical and emotional safety. And then
Mhm.
we can get curious about this other person and engage in that.
So you kind of touched on it. The work you're doing now is more in the workplace. Is that correct?
I do some stuff in the workplace, yeah, and that's why I had written my book, because some of the conversations I've had with people in sort of in the workplace path is really about some of those workplace conflicts. At one point in my life, I actually became a director of a number of different departments, and HR was one of them. And in leadership, everything's about conflict management. It really is about the primary issues are relationship problems that people have. They have no idea how to come together in dialogue and have difficult conversations with each other. And the beginning part of having a difficult conversation with someone begins with managing yourself. You have to manage your own difficult feelings and your own emotions with loving compassion. Manage those so that you can regulate yourself enough so that you can then have a conversation with someone, because they may say something that you find triggering or you find offensive or get defensive. And so I've seen very compassionate people come together, and then they'll walk off, they'll get upset, they'll start going at each other. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Each of you need to come and regulate your emotions and give yourself what you need in that moment. It could be feeling safe, it could be feeling validated, it could be feeling love, so that then you can lean in and get curious and say, what's going on for you, that we're in this situation where you are, causing conflict at work, or gossiping about me, or bullying and harassing me. Because one of the things I learned in managing HR for those 3 years, I think it was that people that bully see themselves as victims. And when we would punish them, like when we would give them like consequences, and you're like, that would only further their perspective as victims. You're like, see, I'm a
Mhm.
victim, therefore this is why I'm bullying. But when you flipped it around, and when you were like, well, where's the compassion? Where's all that stuff? Self-compassion was one of the hardest things for them to do, because they separated their feelings of shame. People can do hurtful things because they're detached from their shame. When you help them reconnect with their shame, that's
Mhm.
really when things that's really when they like, if they can do that with compassion and love, they can then begin to understand how they've been hurtful. But until they can do that with love and compassion, all you get is defensiveness. They'll deny it, or they will become super defensive. And it's kind of an interesting thing to watch.
Oh.
HR in a big company would have to be an adventure. I've never had an interaction with an HR member ever, other than to, fill out a tax form or whatnot. But
Do you see a lot?
out of
Yeah.
curiosity, what's the demographics of most conflicts? Man, female, male, two women. What's the deal there?
Yeah, that's hard for me to answer, because I was primarily, so child protection is primarily a female-led profession. Like there's very few men, like let's say they make 10%, but here's the interesting part about the whole gender equity thing. So men make, I would say, about 10% of the population. It tends to be mostly women who are child protection workers and managers, but men make up about over 50% of leadership. So you get 10% of men who are in the workplace, they make up the majority of the leadership, which is it's interesting to watch because you're like, how did that happen? There's 80% women. How come they're? But I think this is definitely changing. But at the time when I was working, there was definitely that dynamic where like this small 10% of the men ended up in those leadership positions, and you're like, up in there. That's funny.
Yeah. I could probably go on a 10 or 15-minute rant for you if you'd like that, but no, because, well, they've screwed it up. So, and they're at the, like I said, they fail upwards, right? So you get the least, especially in government, you get the least qualified moving up the chain. And in this case, it happens to be the guys. So hopefully as this, and I would rather call it like more of a qualification, better qualified women than better qualified men can take over those positions if the public insists it happens. You said they have a big input in that. So the leadership sucks, get rid of them. And if those men can be replaced by women, more power to all of
them. Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's where we don't realize how much we give our power away to people and things, including government and all of these things. And it's not about anarchy. It really is about what choices are we going to make as a humanity? What choices have we made thus far and are going to continue to choose? So we have these people that are these corporations that are trying to squeeze as much as possible to get the maximum profit. And that comes from a place of lack. A person that feels abundant doesn't have to. It doesn't matter whether you're poor or whether you're ultra rich. Lack is lack. And so greed comes from a place of lack, that it's never enough. You keep filling in that hole. You keep trying to fill in that hole with all this money, and it's never enough money. And it's like, that's lack. That's not. You can have $1 million and still feel lack. So we as people have the power to choose. We choose with our money. We choose with our choices. And sometimes we are more lax about things like, well, I'd rather have convenience than whatever. But that convenience has consequences. And I think what we saw with COVID, and we're starting to really understand, is how interconnected we all are. And so those consequences that we don't think are consequences eventually trickle down to us, right? And so now we're seeing the cost of living has ridiculously gone up. But we have been okay with corporations making as much money as possible, or shrinkflation. We haven't noticed that things are getting smaller but more expensive. And now people are starting to do different boycotts, and some of them are. And so really it's about the power is always been in the people. And we had forgotten that. So how do we take our power back in a way that we don't need to disempower other people. It's about us making choices that really align with the kind of world we want to create, which from my perspective would be loving and compassionate and generous and abundant.
Now we need Pfizer to sponsor you and get your message out on all the major networks.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my God.
That'll never, no. Yeah, I would like to have I think it would be cool to talk to you about how to fix those issues, but that's just not even, you can't even get into that because it'd be spit off to 15, 20 minutes before you even knew it. And but we're so on the same page on this. And
I will say one thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say one thing. So I will say one of the hardest things I had to admit to myself is that these systems are a reflection of who we are. What I mean is, so when I was working in the child welfare system, and I used to intersect with a whole bunch of different systems, the youth justice and like the medical system, a whole bunch of them. And what I noticed was that these systems are based on separation, isolation, punishment. But then I had to reflect on myself. How do I act when people hurt me? And back then, I'm telling you, I wanted them to get as far away from me as possible. I wanted them to be punished so that they could never do it again. And honestly, I didn't ever want to see them. I wanted them to be far away from me and my community because I didn't want them to hurt my family. And these are the systems we have. If we want the systems to change, we have to be willing to change. And that was hard for me to admit. It was hard for me to look at myself and say, oh, these systems are just a mirror of me. So, how do I have to change? How much more forgiveness do I have to do? How much more curiosity? How much more less judgment? And it really started with myself. I had to forgive myself more. I had to love myself more. And once I did that, the love just kind of spilled over. Like what you were feeling about with your baby, that becomes who you are. So when you start to love yourself and accept yourself and be compassionate with yourself, when like now my mistakes make me laugh. I am like in hilarious roaring, like when I make a mistake, and it could be a colossal mistake. I'm like howling at myself. I'm like, isn't this ridiculous? And so when you fill yourself with love, that spills onto other people. You give to people from your overflow, not from your reserves. But when you give to people and your bucket is empty, that's when resentment happens. That's when, so this is where, and I noticed that with my kids. That's why when my bucket was empty and they needed something from me, I would get short with them and snap at them. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. But when I would fill my bucket with my own love and compassion, it naturally flowed to them because I was full. And so really, it really doesn't start with judging ourselves and like, look at these crappy systems we created. It really just starts with us loving and accepting ourselves just as we are. Even when we make a mistake and you're like, oh, look at this jerk. That's okay. We have to be willing to love and accept ourselves. And then it's easier to actually love and accept other people because we're like, oh, he's just being a jerk today. That's okay. It happens. I remember when I used to do being a jerk. We become more forgiving and accepting of one another when we start with us.
You're a saint behind the microphone here. Did you hear about the Buddhist that ordered a pizza?
No.
Yeah, he said, please make me one with everything.
Oh.
So the delivery guy, he shows up with the pizza and the Buddhist pays for it. Delivery guy starts to walk off. He says, hey, where's my change? The delivery guy said, you ought to know change comes from within.
Actually,
that's awesome. That is really
pretty
great.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Great. Yeah. One of the things I'm playing with right now is, and I by no means mastered it, and I think that's part of why I'm sort of going on this journey. I'm really interested in doing this documentary and really getting deep with those people who have forgiven those who have been the most hurtful, because I really want to learn how to love all aspects of my life. Can we truly love everything that happens to us, all the people, everything, and see the divinity in it? Am I there? No, not even close. But I'm willing. I'm willing to learn how to get there. I'm willing to see the divinity in all things, and then to choose, okay, what do I want to experience? Not this or that. And so this is sort of a journey. I follow Neil Walsh, I think he wrote Conversations with God. And one of the things he said, it's this book is this, he was really frustrated with his life. And it was this, he writes this conversation with God that he had. And it was like the channel text. And one of the things he said is, what we do for others, we do for ourselves. And what we do for ourselves, we do for others. And so in this journey of interviewing these people, I've really been transformed in trying to understand, what does it take? What's true love? What is it real? And that has helped other people in listening to my podcast and in listening to reading my work and doing all that stuff. And that also helps me back again, because as they transform, they will be more loving and compassionate, and that will spill out to this world. And that comes back to me. So it's all interconnected. So I'm gaining from two grounds, from me helping myself really understand this, and from in helping others, that comes back to me and my kids and to everyone else. So.
Absolutely. Scott Peck wrote a book called Walk to the Beat of Your Own Drum. And I think it was in his sequel, and I can't remember the name of it. He had a bunch of different definitions for love. And it was really interesting for me to think about love from different perspectives. And you touched on some of it, but he went a little deeper in defining love in different ways. I can't remember all those ways now, but it truly helped me in my life in the way that I look at love and understand love, especially in relationships. You get into a relationship and everything's love till it's not. And then that, that's when the work comes about, and truly loving somebody and staying in that unconditional state when uh, all the shininess of the new car and the new car smell goes away. So,
Yeah, and how can you love people, like I said, when they don't always behave the way that you? How do you engage in conversation from a place of curiosity instead of judgment? One of the things that I
mhm,
do with my partner is, I make sure that I vocalize that I know that his intention is never to hurt me, right? I will say, I know your intention is not to blah, 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 but the impact of this has been this for me. Like, this is how I feel. And so we work through those conversations. So I
mhm,
give him always the benefit of the doubt, because, and otherwise, why would I be his partner if his intention was to hurt me? But sometimes his behavior can have an impact on me. Now, I always have to reflect first in terms of like, okay, why is this triggering me and what's in it for me to be healed before I even start with that, right? And so once I'm able to kind of manage those emotions with love and support, then I can engage in the dialogue, and then he's open and receptive to having a conversation, and we make each other laugh as we have engage in these conversations. um and so it comes from that place of curiosity and non-judgment, and that really enables
mhm,
us to have a true dialogue where people don't feel judged.
yeah,
And so often I will tell people, that I will share that, you can begin with, I know it's not your intention to hurt me because you're a good person, right? But the impact of this was this for me.
mhm,
Can we talk about it? Because when the shame, and shame is so interesting, right? Like, I don't know, Brene Brown does a great job in explaining the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is like, oh, I did something, but it's a behavior, whereas shame is like, there's something inherently wrong with me, and therefore I don't want anyone to see that. And in my life, I have seen many people who are very, very hurtful not be able to engage in the dialogue where you can say to them, your behavior was really hurtful. They would get up and leave, or they would deny. That's because they're feeling so much shame, they don't know how to handle it. So they'd rather deny what you're saying than address it, because they can't cope with how hurtful their behavior has been. And so people think it's paradoxical. They're like, "Oh, you're so good in helping, like being compassionate." Compassion or love are one of the hardest things to do when you don't feel you deserve it. It's hard to really, really sit in that space where you're like, I've been so hurtful. Can I still extend kindness to myself so that I can understand what the impact of this behavior was on someone else? Can I manage those difficult feelings to really understand why I had to behave this way? That's tough to do. It's not for the faint of heart. People think, oh, loving compassion are fluffy. No, and I've been on both sides, it's hard to look at yourself and say, you know what? I've hurt people. Do I really deserve? Can I still deserve to be loved? Can I still deserve? And I've also been hurt quite a bit, especially by my parents. And can I look at them? And I do, with just curiosity and understanding and compassion. My dad and I have been able to sit, and he told me all the stories of ancestors. Oh my God, they experienced neglect and poverty and abandonment and murder and all of these things. And you're like, oh my gosh, we carry all of those stories and all of that hurt with generations. Can we then now decide that we're going to carry love and compassion backwards and forwards, and share it and carry those as our gifts from the ancestors moving on? Can we heal? And that's how I felt that responsibility to hear it within myself, because I'm like, I'm not carrying this garbage and giving it to my kids. I just not.
mhm,
No, you certainly can break that cycle. I
yeah,
believe that, but it has to be recognized
yeah,
young enough to where, and you have to have your head on straight,
mhm,
and you have to be committed to it. Because I knew my daughter was never going to go through any of the shit I went through. That was never. She was protected and still is. At 31 years old, I protect her from that even today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
It's
people can make
interesting.
the
You have to
conscious
make,
decision to make that happen.
and thank you, because that's the truth. It's people have to make a conscious choice. Now, some of our brothers and sisters can't make that choice. It's too hard. They will rather use drugs, or they will go and do the same behavior and pass it down. That's where they are, and that's okay. But it is a conscious choice, and it is the challenging choice to go against the grain, but it is the brave choice, and it is the most loving choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I applaud you for making a different choice, because, if all your generations have done that, for you to go against the grain and go, you know what? No, this ends with me. This stops here. I'm choosing a different path.
Yeah.
I think that takes a lot of courage and love.
You have to.
We did something right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we had to. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have to. We could have made other choices.
I did. I could never.
You could have made other choices.
Well, for sure. And that's really what it comes down to. We all know people have screwed up in their lives, and continue to screw up, screwed up in their lives and made changes. And it all really just comes down to personal choices. And you can certainly make those choices better with love and compassion in your heart, no doubt about that. So
yeah. One of the other things that I mentioned, that I learned also in the child welfare system, is that sometimes the people that face the most adversity were some of the most kinder people. Like, it's almost like they recognize the humanity and lack thereof, and then they want to help other people. The young people that I worked with, they wanted to help other people. They wanted to be able to be of value and assistance. And sometimes people that haven't gone through adversity, they lack that perspective of what it feels like to be heard, or what, like, and so this is why some of these stories, they're so extraordinary that I listen to. But some of those people have had some real hardships, and to be able to tap into that humanity still, and see that humanity, not just in the perpetrators and in themselves, but all other beings, it's something that I think it's within us. It's just we have to make the brave choice of choosing that instead of what is, to some extent, easier in the short term, which is just to be hurtful or to suppress. So
you are my top number one, 100% best fill-in, more favorite guest we've ever had.
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
I'm so glad that Jim found you, because it really
oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I got
really
the last minute. I'm like, oh, sure, okay, yeah.
It's
yeah,
funny,
I appreciate you guys having on my show.
Spirit just guided me to you for some reason, and I'm glad it did. And I was like, this woman's going to respond and come on our show in the last minute, and you did. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I
wonderful
also follow. I really, really appreciate you guys inviting me. I also listen to my guidance, right? And like this, like everything that I've done thus far in this journey, since I've made the decision of like, okay, like if I'm not supposed to do this, what else am I doing? From writing the books to doing the talk and all of this, and now I'm sort of being pushed towards. I'm finishing my second book on education, like reimagining education, because that's another part, I think, where things. Good shift.
I listened to the whole interview with the school lady you had on a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
I think
I listened to a couple. Yeah,
they're seeing some really important changes, like really important changes in terms of like the kids, not just the kids' grades, but their relationships with people, their relationships with each other. There's a couple more that I'm going to publish as well. It's like kids that have had bad adversities at home, they can come to school and there's a safe space so that they can then flourish, because not all homes are going to be like the most loving and compassionate parents. And so, but kids, in order for us to create or to foster the best human beings, the best humanity that we can think about, we have to be able to foster. There's got to be a place where these kids can go in and find the love and compassion within themselves, really be like tap into their creativity and their passions, and really all those things that I'm not sure that the school system is really doing. And I think there has to be a shift now, because with AI really focusing on doing a whole bunch of jobs, I think they're really mastering our attention in our manifestation, in our love and compassion, our emotions, regulating our emotions, and really tapping into that creativity is really going to serve people well, because in a lot of those positions, AI is going to be able to do it. And so it really is about what we want to create. But yeah, it's been sort of an interesting journey in listening to spirit, because sometimes I'm like, you want me to do what? And it's sort of like, yeah, go here. And I'm like, okay. So then I go here and I'm like, okay. And then you're like, do this. And I'm like, okay, but shouldn't I be doing this? Nope, do this. I'm like, okay.
Go talk to Yogi and the Beach Man.
Yeah.
I know. That's right. That's right.
Well, hopefully you'll come back on in a few months, see how winter's going up north, and we'll tell you how nice it is down here in February.
Yes, you can tell me.
Like
yeah,
that.
You can just tell me how cold, how horrible it is over here, and then you can tell me how beautiful and gorgeous it's there. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate. I love this conversation. It was great.
You're welcome. So what was the title of your most recent book again?
I'm not. I'm still in the process of writing it. But my other book, so that's called Reimagining Education. My older book is called. Hold on a second. It's Reimagining Work.
Reimagining Work, and where can I'm assuming Amazon?
Oh yeah, everywhere. Amazon.
Places?
I'm gonna put it on Barnes and Noble, but it's so Amazon. You can buy it off Indigo Chapters. There's also an audio version where I do, and within the book, there's also like little tiny exercises that cause you to reflect. And that's really the core of the work, is you going inward and really understanding your relationship with work, understanding your relationship with money, and understanding your relationship with your fellow human beings that make mistakes. And it all kind of weaves love and compassion in really reflecting on, because when I've worked with people, when there was a coaching component to my job, which I've kind of suspended in this moment because I'm being guided to really focus on this documentary that I want to do. And it was all about people didn't feel worthy. Like they didn't feel worthy to live their biggest and boldest dreams. They kept it small, they kept it safe. And it's like, no, what's your biggest, boldest dreams? And some people couldn't tell me. They just couldn't tell me. And I really had to reflect on what's going on over here. And sometimes they were told by their parents not to dream, not to do. So they were squashed. And so they've suppressed so much, they don't even know what it is that their biggest dream is. And it doesn't have to be like a thing. It could just be live joyfully. Okay, so then how do we work on you living joyfully? Like but some people, they're like, I have to get back to you. I have no idea. And so you're like, oh, okay, so you don't really know what's in your heart. So how do you get to start to work and to talk to your heart? And so the book is available everywhere. There's also an audio version. My TEDx talk should be coming out fairly soon. I have seen the edits.
Nice.
And then I do feel in my heart this is going to move forward. I just don't know when. I'm doing my documentary really is focusing on sharing those extraordinary stories in a more bigger, bolder way than I have in my podcast, because they're kind of peppered within like some of those real extreme. I have this database of people that I really want to talk to. And so I'm being guided there to do this documentary. I'm just in the process of securing funding in the moment. So, but the team has come together so beautifully.
That's
and
exciting.
just I'm very excited because we came together with a film company that was just like so excited about this project, and all these other people have come on board, and it was just honestly talking about manifestation. If we don't, I know I have to, you guys have to get going, but
we need to have
there's
you back
so many
tomorrow.
times there's so many times when in my head I will just play. I was just like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to do a documentary? Wouldn't it be fun? And all of a sudden things just kind of have come together with the funder and all of these other people, and it's like, holy cow, I was just playing in my head. I was just playing in my head in terms of wouldn't it be nice? And that's even sort of how I got that TEDx talk. I was like, I kind of had this, I had applied, like when I was doing it kind of the 3D way, I applied several times, got rejected. And when I was like, okay, I'm like, what's going on here? And they're like, not the right, like my inner heart was like, not the right message and not the right time. So then I remember I applied this last time, and I was just in my head giving out the message. You know how you said you were giving out love? I was just giving out my message. Oh, and I was having fun playing with it, whatever. And the next thing I know, I'm on the stage doing it. And so I really do believe in that whole perspective of you have to live it in your heart and just kind of like feel it. And then when you feel it, you align to it. So that's kind of how that came about. I was just playing with the idea of doing a documentary on these because I want to travel the world and really get these like extraordinary stories. Like I'd love to go to Rwanda and talk to these people, and like that I'm interviewing tomorrow. Like I'd actually physically love to be there in that space, and really, really understand what it takes to do that kind of love. So.
Good for you. And thank you for doing the work for this world that needs it to help alleviate the suffering here.
Thank
You're
you.
doing a great job.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank
Can
you
you
very
hold up your
much.
book one more time?
Yeah, of course. It's
Okay,
called
so our viewers can see it on YouTube.
Reimagining Work. It's from suffering at work to creating a more loving, compassionate, abundant, and spiritually aligned life. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And it has a lot of sorry, go ahead.
No, I said Jim will throw a link in the show notes.
Yeah, that would be absolutely terrific. Yeah, the core of the work really is the reflection. So, I share my stories in being in the workplace because I've been in leadership for over 20 years, and it really is about you tapping into some of those limiting beliefs, and then how can you deal with those interpersonal issues with love and compassion for yourself and reimagine people. And there's a little bit about some of the magical things that have been like, like little tiny tidbits in terms of like some expanding your consciousness in terms of, your reality isn't as real and how can we play with this? So it's just
I like it.
Me too.
It is fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on the show. You're an extraordinary guest.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back if you'll join us again.
We'd love to have you back.
Yeah, for sure. I'd come back anytime. This is a fun conversation.
Cool.
Thank you
we'll
very much.
See you tomorrow at 7.
Yeah. Right. See you, Giselle. Thanks.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Have a good day. Bye. So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode. Subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the Beach Man.